Greetings, Mark Garang here, publisher of the Conway Daily Sun, and today my guests are two members of the Conway Municipal Budget Committee, Bill Marvel and Peter Donohoe. Greetings, Peter.
Thank you.
Bill.
Thanks, Mark.
Now, Peter, you're not the chairman anymore, right?
I am still the chairman.
Okay, so how's that? I mean, it kind of goes with your candidacy
for the member of the Board of Selectmen. So currently, I'm in I would be beginning my third year of 3 consecutive years as an elected member of the Budget Committee. Should I prevail in the Selectmen's race, obviously I would resign my post from, so to correct any confusion about anything that's been stated prior, I am still the Budget Committee chair at current.
Okay, and you would stay on if you don't win?
Absolutely. Okay,
and we always want to be positive about such things, but
absolutely,
you know, there's an eventuality. And all right, Bill, how you doing?
I'm fine.
You all right? Okay. I mean, the big news, this is Thursday, and it was revealed Monday night about the big health insurance debacle, I'll call it, but an increase. And I know nobody really knows what's going on with that yet, but apparently the New Hampshire Trust, which is the intermediary that the school deals with, is a bill, HB something or other, and it's going to somehow pool, they want to rejigger how the pooling works. Right. It's going to increase potentially 40%. Is that something the Budget Committee looks at?
Typically we do. This year there were so many things that we were grappling with. The budget increase, I believe last year's not to exceed percentage was the same as what is projected for 2026 prior to this news, and that is an 8.5% increase. With that kind of a thing going on and that kind of trend, we just didn't dive that deep into it. We've had members in the past who are particularly well versed in things of health insurance nature, things like, you know, why don't the town and the school pool their resources together, or pool together, I should say, to maybe command a better rate. We just did not have that discussion this year, and again, principally because it wasn't a big target for us.
All right, and just we'll just move on really quickly, but the health insurance is almost 20% of the entire budget. I mean, we have a $40 million or $41 million budget.
It's 18% right
18%. And does that include for the retirees too?
No.
Right, so there's like $7 or $8 million just for the insure for premiums for our employees.
Current employees.
And then there's another, what?
$3 million a year.
Yeah.
And that's included in our budget, obviously.
Yes.
It is.
So that comes up to like 10 million.
It exceeds 10 million. In fact, with this year's proposed increase before this 40% warning, it would have been 11 million and something.
Right, which is almost unbelievable to think of a $40 million budget and 11 is just for health insurance.
Personnel. I found a couple of notes that I made on my budget book during the course of the year. Personnel last year composed 79.76% of the school budget. This year it's 83.83% of the proposed budget, or at least it was.
Now, Bill, you've made many comparisons to 20 years ago when we had a third fewer students and as many employees as we do now. I mean, I interviewed Amy and Ryan and Mike D, and they made a pretty good case that things have changed. I mean, a lot of and I realize, right, so I'm setting it up for you, but, you know, and I think it's true, and this is something that people who aren't in the school system don't understand, including me, but I think it is a factor that we just have a whole lot more disadvantaged kids. A lot of those part-time people and aides, they're aides. So that's kind of their response to it, is that things have changed.
It always is. I've been very disappointed in the change of administration, seeing no change in the methods and strategies of supporting the budgets. The continual process is to find excuses for why we're failing and then spend more money to fix those failures. I watched the interview that you had with the school board and the superintendent, and what I heard about drug use and children who are homeless and
disadvantaged.
Yes, disadvantaged. We had all of that when I was a kid. There was a lot of poverty when 60 years ago and 65 years ago in this town. A great deal. There was a lot of alcoholism. I think the Kennetts who owned the companies drank as heavily as the woodsmen that they hired for the Kennett Company. And as for homelessness, I spent my own the better part of my senior year living outside the house with a couple of 21-year-olds. So you can imagine what that was like.
Yeah, but that was probably by choice.
It was.
That was a rifle and a couple of beers,
both
makes it easier.
My choice and my father's. But those same problems existed. The differences that we have are, for instance, now they're forcing older kids who might not want to even be in school to remain in school. Right. That's a major problem. They're hiring basically people who should be working for the state, and we're paying for them directly out of our tax money to cover these problems that they see that they're using as excuses for failure. But academics was as successful in the 50s and 60s as it is now, and we had vocational training of sorts then. Now we have such exceptional vocational training that we're being distracted from the academics that are the core of the educational system.
Peter, what do you think about the number of personnel in this school?
Watching some of the statistics that Bill has offered and looking at the ratios in classrooms and hearing some discussions about things such as under-enrolled classes and not getting a good sense that the current administration is focused on trying to cull out some of that excess. I don't think that we're on a manageable trajectory at this point regarding the number of personnel to the number of kids. I don't see an awful lot of effort to rebalance the number of students to teachers in any meaningful way. We hear a lot about expansion of programs, greater breadth, but yet we're struggling with the basics, trying to get test scores into a more acceptable realm. And I think that's going the wrong way. I think we need to focus more on core. It's not to say that we would disregard the additional, perhaps vocational pathways, but I think we should refocus on core, get test scores back up, and then rebalance once again.
I mean, what do you think about the, and Bill, you've been critical, you're critical of the core curriculum humanities programs at school, I mean, in general speaking, and you're basically saying it's at the expense of having this elaborate career tech center.
Yes.
So, and I'll start with you, Peter, because I mean, do you think that one has to be at the expense of the other? Because we do. I mean, not every high school has a career tech center like we do, and we have, I think, one of the best in the state. So it kind of goes back to Bill's point, is that all these kids who, in our age, not you're just a kid, Peter, but they would just drop out of school. They just weren't there, right? I don't know what the graduation rate.
Often they
were
did.
gone. Like a third of them, like in World War II. I always go back to World War II. Only half the kids ever made it through high school. Right. So, we are mandated to keep them in school. Obviously, a career tech is a good place to.
It is. And I'll preface what I'm going to say with the fact that I spent most of my adult career working in a company that employed tradespeople. And I understood the importance of maintaining a certain amount of feed into the trades, and how much that has fallen off in recent years, mostly because of technology, and mostly because young people prefer technology-based career path, potentially. I recognize there's great value in keeping a career tech center. I asked the administration early on in our budget season about the prospect, since we have such a vast vocational offering at Kennett High School. What is the prospect of making that available outside of just the current SAU? In other words, using our vocational school as a means to draw other people.
School.
Right. For instance, from Freiburg. And the answer I got, and I understood it at the time, I'm I'm a little disappointed that it hadn't happened until now, because the Career Tech Center has been in place now since the building was built, and prior in a different version. Prior to that, that is. But the administration answer was, we're in the process of doing negotiations now, we'll deal with that next. But I think it was a missed opportunity for us to have made that available to other districts and to help offset some of the associated costs so that we could focus more money on core curriculum.
Is it available now?
I don't believe so.
It's not exactly true that other schools don't have career tech centers. I mean, if they don't have their own, they farm out their kids to other districts that do. But I know Mike DeGregorio loves to use the Career Tech Center that we have as an excuse for having so many teachers. But the town of Claremont has its own Career Tech Center, and they have one teacher for every 14.5 students. We have one for every 10. It isn't a valid excuse, I don't think. And while it's wonderful for us to have opportunities for kids to try different vocations, do we really want to be teaching kids to fly when there are so many who can't read? Mm-hmm. Which brings me to another point that I noticed that when Amy was talking about how many disadvantaged kids we have and the homeless, we only have like 3.5% of the kids who are supposedly homeless, which could mean just they're living with their grandparents. But why is it that a majority of kids can't read at their grade level? 51% there. It doesn't. It's just an excuse, I think, and it's not adequate.
As a regular voters are going to look at the warrant, and fortunately the school warrant is actually shorter than the town warrant, so it's easy to get through. But the first one is going to be the overall budget, and as the school board's budget is about $600,000 higher than the default budget, so voters are going to have the choice between the two.
That's right.
I assume both of you are going to advocating for the default budget.
Yes.
And what specifically, where if this does go through, if the voters vote for the default budget, where do you think the cuts could be made?
Well, first, it isn't the first article. I think it's number 5.
4 or 5. I think
election.
Yes, and then you have some special articles devoted to maintenance that is mandated by the contract.
Right. So Article 6. Sorry about that.
The default budget would cut about $650,000, which is, I think, easily manageable. Given the budgets that they've had in recent years.
But that's easy for us to say, or you
well,
to
it
say.
is, and it would mean probably 10. I know Mike said 12 teachers, but it would be 10 at most to meet that, if that's how you choose it, because the starting salary for a teacher is a little over $40,000. You add in $25,000 for family health insurance, that's $65,000 per teacher. There you are. And then we're a little closer, not far, but we're somewhat closer to a reasonable ratio of teachers to students. Nothing like we should be, probably.
Peter, can you explain in regular terms that us regular voters can understand, is that how does that $600,000 dovetail with the surplus? I mean, there's been a big surplus the last couple of years.
Yes.
And to the school board always says, which is true, is they have to budget 18 months out. That's not easy. I mean, it's not easy for any organization, never mind a school that has a lot of factors that they can't control. So how does that work? I mean, I think one of the reasons we've had a big surplus is that there are a lot of unfilled positions.
Yes.
Okay, so so the voters vote for 600,000, chop it. Can it just be offset by the surplus at the end of the year? How does that work?
Well, not so much. First of all, I want to comment on the comment I often hear from the school district personnel the board in particular, school board, about having to budget 18 months out in the future. The truth is they budget maximum 18 months. Their operating cycle is July 1 to June 30. So when they're talking about budgeting it out to 18 months in the future, they're talking about budgeting it out to June 30 of 2026 in the current cycle. We're not concerned with June of 2026. We're concerned with not just June, but the 11 months prior to that too. So, so it's a little misleading to say that we have to budget 18 months out in the future. That would be to the final number.
Okay.
Regarding the surplus, I have asked, and I asked again this year, if the district uses a target figure for surplus every year. And I haven't found the minutes from the particular deliberative when I asked, and was answered by the former superintendent that they do. The present superintendent claims they do not, which surprises me a little bit, because with such a large budget, you would figure that they would have to have some sort of an idea of where they'd want to end, given the amount of movement there is, across the whole 12 months. I mean, a $40 million budget is a lot of money moving around at a time, and one would believe that they would have to have some idea where they wanted to end up. They surely don't want to end up at zero, and so they'd want to end up something like 5%, 10% of what they figured for their operating budget. But to that point, in my way of thinking, I don't see a $600,000 cut as something that they would have to, or reduction if it were the case with the default budget prevailing and voting in just a week now. I don't see that they would have to make any adjustments to programming whatsoever, given the trend in what they've had for surplus year over year. And I'll add to that, I think the school board already has their eyes on surplus, because as voters will see at the end of the warrant article, there are 2 requests for the school board to have the ability to retain up to $500,000 for 2 new expendable trusts for things that we'll talk about soon.
Okay, so the nutshell to that is that, yes, they could absorb that $600,000 cut with projected surpluses. Is that right?
That's how I see it.
That's how you see it.
Yes.
All right, where do you want to go next, Bill? We want to go to the specials. How about salaries in general? What's on your agenda?
Well, I could speak briefly about salaries. We're told that the average teacher salary has dropped from $59,000 to $58,000, although I think our superintendent said that doesn't happen.
Right.
And that is almost exactly the median household income for the town of Conway. Mm-hmm. So the average teacher makes as much as the median household in the rest of town, which I think illustrates the degree of affordability. I mean, if an entire household can survive on $58,000, why can't one teacher? And the median teacher salary is going up to $52,000 this year, which is higher than the median individual salary in Conway for even the higher paid gender. For some reason, women are paid higher in Conway.
Well, they're generally smarter, for one thing.
and maybe they were smart enough to get into the public school system. But I don't know.
How do you, the counter argument to that is just market forces. I mean, you don't expect the doctor at Memorial, who probably makes $200,000, to, comport with a $50,000 salary, because that's what the market requires. Mm-hmm. So what would be the solution to pay? I mean, if we pay teachers less, we're going to have fewer teachers, one would think.
Which is not necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
But it historically, as I pointed out to Mike at a budget committee meeting recently, we had teachers who were willing to accept the economy in which they lived, the community economy. And we had very good teachers, Crush, Carl Seidenstucker was a Dartmouth graduate. He was a hell of a teacher. And those people stayed with us throughout their careers, and they were not well paid, but neither was anyone else in town. As I told Alex Loth, who, when we were talking about his wife being a teacher, and he said, well, if she were rift from the faculty, we'd probably go somewhere else and we'd be better off. My thought is, if a teacher is in it for the money and wants to go somewhere else, good riddance.
Just a small digression. Speaking of Alec Loth, who is a very smart, bright guy, but he's part of the budget committee.
Yes.
Right. And
Yes.
at the deliberative school meeting, he actually got up, and he was like the minority of the Supreme Court.
Yes.
He actually suggested they restore the cuts that the budget committee decided on. The majority. Is that
he went
procedurally
against,
right?
Well, I think there is not a procedural argument. There's perhaps a moral argument there. He went against the wishes of the board, or the will of the board, with that motion. To Alex's defense, and I always have to try to do this, Alex is new, and perhaps this was just not something that he had realized.
Well, I actually didn't object to the fact that he was contradicting the will of the board. I've done that myself, and at least I've voted that way. My objection was that what he was trying to prevent was a $2+ million cut that would probably have led to the elimination of some teaching positions, and the newest go first, and his wife is one of the newest teachers. So essentially he was, the motion he made was an effort to save his wife's job.
Well, that's a cynical way of looking at it. Bill.
Well, but that's the way that that our board policy on conflict of interests regards it. And that's and I took him to task for that at the last budget committee meeting, and he accepted some responsibility for it. I think perhaps it was political naivete, but maybe not. I don't know.
Maybe more nefarious.
Well,
I don't. It's a little digression here, but on the Peter, with the budget committee, I mean, I call it like the spring ritual, where you guys work all winter, you make the cuts, you come up with a proposed cut.
Not always cuts.
Not always cuts.
No.
What do you mean? Well, you always do. Okay, I'll take
Sure.
that back. But anyway, the last few years, at least with the school budget, you have recommended cuts for the school budget. You fatten up on these budgets all winter, and then you get to the spring deliberative and you get slaughtered.
That's correct.
So do you ever start off the budget season saying, like, let's go out and have a pizza instead of wasting our time, you know?
Some members have said that, and they're not coming back.
Yeah, that's correct. And I think maybe perhaps out of habit, we just, and hope that we dig in every year. And I can't speak for Bill, but every year that I've been doing this, and it hasn't been consecutive, but I did find my name on minutes from 2012, so I know that I go back at least that far with a brief, I left briefly for a year. But I am finding myself digging deeper and deeper and getting a little more informed every year. And I think there's value in that, which is why I encourage anybody that joins the budget committee to, if they join and they get, at least they get through their first term, you now know something, so you have an obligation to continue. And so that's kind of how I viewed the process. I don't disagree with your point that it's very disconcerting that we do all of this work. People probably don't have a clue. I spend, and I am not exaggerating, 20 hours a week on non-procedural budget committee things during January and probably half of February. And that's when it's the most concentrated. And there's a lot of information we pour over. And it's very disappointing when we get to the deliberative and where, clocks are cleaned there. I get that. But I'm not dismayed by that enough to do it any other way.
Okay, politically, why do you think, we'll get back to salaries in a minute, Bill.
Yeah.
No,
why do you think,
We don't have to. I've found my next subject.
Okay, I was going to ask, why do you think more people who would make the budget a priority run for school board? Like, you have the budget committee, you have a lot of smart people in the budget committee.
We do.
Many of whom would like to see Steve Angers and all that. Yeah. Why don't more people run for the school board other than people who are, I hate to use this term, but kind of like pro-school?
Yeah, well,
Go.
That is my next subject. I think that 35 years ago I was sitting in on every school board meeting planning to run for the school board because my interest was curriculum. I didn't have any children in school at the time, but I was interested in what was happening with curriculum, and it soon became clear to me that school board members don't really have anything to do with curriculum. They get to say, yeah, okay, we approve this. That's basically it. I think, let me jump back to why I would stay on the budget committee when it looks like next year that the school lobby is doing its best to pack the budget committee with school plans, whose clear aim is to support the school budget no matter what. You've got Melanie LaBelle running for the school board and her husband running for the budget committee to rubber stamp, which he does there, which is a rubber stamp of what the superintendent gives them. And that's exactly the problem. I tried to bring it up to the school board Monday night, that there are no checks and balances. No one is arguing about any expenditures. And that's why they're just practically going crazy spending money. Our school board, as a school board and as members of the SAU, are just spending money hand over fist, and no one knows why unless they get a 200-page budget book, as the budget committee does. Mm-hmm. And I suspect we're among the only people in town who really understand the budget. And sometimes we find that we don't ourselves.
That's right.
And so I want to keep getting that information. And so I will stay on the budget committee, even though it's clearly going to be a rubber stamp next year.
I mean, that was always the thing, and I was got the warrant article for the Charter Commission last year, which we did, and it didn't pass. Mm-hmm. The new charter didn't pass, but the whole idea was to be able to get control of the school budget.
Which was not in its purview.
Which was not, we found out it's not in its purview, but anyway, that's another story. But it is kind of too bad structurally that the school board is, good or bad, is just, I mean, not up or down, they're dealing with the budget issues all the time. Mm-hmm. And unlike a city like Berlin, where it's the city council that decides the budget, and the school board, to me, does what it should. It tackles school issues, right. Curriculum and teacher, all those things.
They do spend a lot of time on policy, a great deal of time, it seems. Sometimes they seem to have a ridiculous number of policies. It's hard to tell how many, because they have this alphabetical code they use, a 4-letter code to identify each policy, and I have no idea how that works, but I've heard that there are just hundreds of policies, and that's what they do. They don't really pay much attention to the education that they allegedly are devoted to.
Peter, anything, going back to the salaries, any thoughts on salaries? I mean, I think it's just,
yeah,
it's a little difficult to see how we're going to attract teachers.
Yep.
I mean, it is a market-based world we live in.
It is, and as difficult as it is to say this, in my opinion, fewer teachers in the system, better efficiencies would mean higher starting salaries and giving raises that we can afford. We are going to be looking at a brand new teacher's contract coming up. The 3-year that we voted on 3 years ago is expiring after this year. So for part of this year's deliberations, we will be seeing what will be the next round of teachers' contracts. And I'm concerned about what that costs, what the price tag is going to be for that. I'm especially concerned because there seems to be no effort to rebalance student-teacher ratios and try to get things back online.
And if the school board were not looking to hire or keep so many teachers, the competition would be less.
Right.
Good point. And I think anybody who's gone through school, and we all have, there's only a handful of really, really good teachers, mm-hmm. And this gets back to the idea of merit pay, which mm-hmm. Is that something that could even be considered, but not really with the school contracts? I remember talking to Carl Nelson about this, and I said, he says, well, and this was in the locker room at Cranmore, right? So just an off-the-record comment.
Sure.
But he's dead now. So.
It's very off the record. But, and I said, he said, well, how would you establish who are the best teachers? Well, you Carl, mm-hmm. the administrators, and the kids. Mm-hmm. And if you just did a survey, which were the best teachers, and then you just rank the top 10 or 15, whatever it is, and he said, well, the kids with the popularity. No, the kids know who the best teachers are. I mean, is merit pay just not something that's even conceivable in a school system?
Teachers hate merit pay, it seems, as a group. They probably because of that issue of who's going to decide. I do think it would be easier to keep better teachers, I think, if we didn't have a teachers union, and then we wouldn't have to be retraining them as we're going to next year. I don't know if you're aware of it, but next year they're devoting 15 days to early release so teachers can take professional development.
Are those new days? Or?
Well, there are 10 new days. I counted 5 last year, so there will be 15 next year. And even though they're half days, I think you can understand that a half day is kind of chaotic compared to a regular day. Something is going to be lost, and it's the kids who are going to lose it. And they're doing that to, now that they're admitting or using as an excuse teacher quality for the academic failure in the system. And it's the kids, and the teachers are not going to do it on their own time, apparently. Another problem with having unionized teachers. When you come right down to it, it's a toss-up for me whether teachers' unions or parent-teacher organizations have done more damage to public education over the years. The one by securing their own interests at the cost of taxpayers and students, and the other by insulating the system from criticism and accountability.
Yeah, and Peter, just going back to the salaries again, how do we attract teachers then if we don't pay them a market rate? I mean, is there a way?
How do we?
How would we? I mean, what's
in the current environment,
yeah,
or
right? I guess we could, and you said that fewer teachers pay fewer teachers more money.
Right.
Yeah.
That would be number one. There's an awful lot of discussion about pay being the primary motivator for people, and I think Bill touched on this a little bit ago. An awful lot of people just want to be here, and I still think that that's the case. I know it's difficult
just
to
live here.
To live here, yeah. I know it's harder, if not nearly impossible, to find housing, so I know that we're running up against that too. But I think it is a mistake to overly focus on pay. I think that there's a bunch of things that go into an environment. Pay is certainly a necessary pre-qualifier, but where you are, what the tone of and the environment that you're working in, I think, is a big thing. That's something I don't have any sense of whatsoever, and I'm not suggesting that there's anything wrong with that. But if there's a problem with the overall vibe within a particular school, or perhaps in the district, that's going to have that perhaps would have more of an effect on attracting new teachers than even the starting salary.
You've got to calculate, though, all of the benefits that have been accrued over the years. And the school board has relied on deferred benefits. Higher pay for more experienced teachers, paying for the health insurance premiums of retired teachers. And now that all of those deferred benefits are in place, now they're coming back and saying, oh yeah, we've got to work on salaries again, starting salaries. In most occupations, starting salaries are not terribly munificent. If you...
and what does that word mean?
Generous.
Okay.
Hey,
this isn't your column, Bill. You have to speak in regular language.
Sorry. I'll check my thesaurus. It may partly be the jealousy over, so to speak, between teachers and administrators. I mean, look how much our administrators are paid. We have the least experienced superintendent, probably still, in New Hampshire, and she's paid higher than 94 of the 106 other superintendents. The SAU has gone wild in giving salary increases in the last year. Pam Stimson got 13% last year. They just hired a
curriculum coordinator.
Curriculum coordinator, a former teacher, $120,000 a year. Nothing is in the upper administration is under $100,000 now, and that's the SAU, I suppose, does it because they have no accountability. No voter ever gets to vote on what they spent. But it was mainly Mike DeGregorio's amateur negotiating skills that gave Amy $30,000 more than the guy who had been doing it for 9 years.
Peter, any thoughts on administrative salaries?
High, too high, and I think it's a classic example of let's throw more money at this and expect something better. And I'm going to reserve any comment about whether better can happen. So far, it hasn't happened, but I'm hopeful that there'll be some improvements in the future as people get their sea legs under them and get going. I'll add to something Bill said. I've over the years of teacher contracts and of salaries on that subject, the better tenured teachers, generally speaking, have crowded out this district's ability to hire and even retain incoming teachers, because a combination, as Bill described, combination of a certain salary with the multitude of steps that we have currently in our way of remuneration, along with a very generous benefits package, the health insurance, the retirement health. Those things combined have conspired to crowd out our ability to make money available to get people on board on the lower end, and we've struggled with that for a long time. I know the administration made some changes so that I don't know when it happened, but at age 65, some of the newer teachers are going to age out of the what is it, a perpetual health insurance,
Yes,
otherwise,
I
right?
think so, yes.
So if you live to 85 and you not graduate, but if you retire at 60, then you've got 25 years of free health care. That's pretty rich. That's very rich. And it's tough in a small town like Conway or in this district where median pay is as low as it is.
Because I think, I mean, obviously Medicare is available at 65.
It is.
And I'm on it, and you know, and it's very good. I'm surprised about that. I always thought that you actually had to get off a private healthcare plan to go on Medicare, but you don't. You can actually have both to some level. But
Yeah.
anyway, how about special articles? I know you've written, I don't remember exactly, but that the special articles are like $1 million more this year total than last year.
They're, well,
it's something more like
closer to 4
yeah.
million if you add them all in, including the ones that are hoping to take back some of the surplus that we would otherwise see reduced taxes.
So which ones would you be against?
All of them.
All of them.
Well, there are 3 exceptions. The first 3, which are relatively small, are maintenance items that are contractually obligated.
Right, because of sending towns. for
What
the
about
elementaries.
number 5, which is the contract for
No.
support personnel?
I'm not supporting any contracts until this administration starts
Scaling.
pairing faculty.
I'll add to that too, if I may, Bill,
Sure.
that one little known fact was that the number, that's CESP, I believe, is that one, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Generally, I'd be in support of that, but in light of the fact that there are some, I think there were as many as 13 open positions, I find it difficult to support an additional spending item for increase in salaries when you have that many open positions just in that group alone.
But isn't that the idea, that the reason why we have a lot of open positions because it's not high enough pay?
Just scaling over the paper and reading the help wanted ads and seeing the same ones over and over again, I'm going to come back to my theme again. I don't think that more pay is going to attract people.
All right. What about, and so you're, all these other, we won't go through them here because they're a little dry, but
Well, there's the
Project Succeed you're against, and the
I supported Project Succeed.
and a bunch of capital reserves, 8 is a capital reserve.
The $1.8 million building maintenance, adding to the building maintenance fund, that was a tricky one. I had some challenges in my own decision about whether to support that or not this year, because last year we were greeted at the deliberative with a move by the school board to reduce the ask for the whatever article it was then by $500,000, because the quote for the roof at Kennett came in $500,000 less, and they did the responsible thing. They reduced the ask for that warrant article by $500,000. I'm saying this because I'm very skeptical about, and I brought this up before, about how liberal the Gale, the so-called Gale report, is on the condition of schools, liberal in the sense that I think they vastly overestimated the cost of some of the projects that need to be undertaken. And when I had asked that question before, I didn't get a lot of pushback of the administration.
It does kind of, I mean, municipal buildings, whatever reason, but it kind of defies logic that $8 million or $5 million to redo the roof at John Fuller.
It has to do with the deeper pockets. A private person couldn't pay that much, and so the bid wouldn't be that high. I was opposed to that article simply because it is one of so many profligate articles looking for so much money that I think if this school board doesn't get a serious rebuke this year from the voters, similar to what happened last year with the default budget, I don't think Peter has called this budget unsustainable. I think it borders on irresponsible. Ordinarily, I would have supported something like that, but with this spendthrift school board, I think it's more important to demonstrate that people have had enough.
I mean, the thing that I guess I'm going to use the word, I don't want to editorialize here, so I won't. Let's go to Article 11, which is the one that probably will, if there is one special article that's going to fail, it's probably Special Article 11, which is doing the design study to move the front to the back or the back to the front.
Yes.
You want it, or?
Oh, go ahead.
Well,
I mean, actually, I've heard a number of people pick up your idea if it was yours about just build the sidewalk.
Yeah, if it's that important. I learned yesterday that everything in the office is hardwired into the rest of the building. It would take millions of dollars, millions, and not just 2 or 3 million probably, to do this. And for what purpose? They didn't consider it worth doing until they finally came up with this idea of the sudden security problem that we have, which we've had for decades.
Well, the thing that struck me interviewing Mike and Ryan and Amy was that's the way I've understood as being presented. That's a security issue, and what price you put on security and all that debate. But then I think it was Mike that said, well, it's really just fixing an old problem. I mean, that the administrative offices should be in the back of the new front. Yeah. So it's not as much as a security issue, which is part of it. Yeah. What do you?
Well, then the convenience issue is not worth the money. But if you can tie it into security, it is. That sounds like
that's a pitch.
Yeah, that's a specious argument. What I see is, Mike has been on the board for years, recently and in the past. He claims it was a problem with him before, never brought it up before. I look at it as either an effort to so balloon the budget that that everything disappears into it, and that that no one can fathom where the money went, or as a means of foisting his moral responsibility on the voters, because he said, well, if they don't pass it, then that's on them. So he's morally exempt.
Peter, what do you think of that? I'm sure you probably not support it.
I did not. I did support. There's an ask for $100,000 amount to establish the security and such fund. The remaining two gave me great concern because for the viewers, they give the school board the ability to retain up to, and this is times 2, up to $500,000 from surplus for security purposes. We discussed this hotly during our
and this is Article 13?
I believe it's 12 and 13.
Okay, so 12 we have 12 is 500 to the expendable trust fund.
Yep.
And then also 13 is 500,000 to place in the expendable trust fund safety and security trust.
Up to 500,000.
Up to 500,000.
That's right.
So how can it be up to 500?
Well, I guess the question would be they would be able to choose based on what the surplus was at the end of the year, they'd be able to choose an amount, but not to exceed 500,000 to make available for expenditures for those stated purposes.
But
as
so
I understand
if it's
it.
in the trust fund,
Yep.
then does this, let's say it passes.
Yes.
Does that mean it's sort of a free pass for the school board to spend
Yes.
that 500,000?
Simply speaking, yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
I
as it
think they would
goes.
have a public hearing, much like the public hearing they had on the school name change, which was posted at the SAU office and somewhere else no one knows.
They met the statutory requirement,
right,
period.
and then they had and then they have a hearing. No one comes, and they spend the money.
Right, right. But of those two items, I started to say
Sure,
we
go ahead.
debated it hotly. Everybody, I think, with maybe a couple of exceptions, had great concerns about those two requests, those asks, because they saw the whole entire initiative as potentially a bottomless pit, or chasing an agenda that would be impossible to ever fulfill.
I mean the safety agenda.
Correct.
Yes, you
How
can
safe-
never achieve absolute safety. And no matter how much you spend and no matter how much innovation you invest, when and if,
Right.
we hope if, such a problem,
Or never.
right,
Right.
it's going to happen through an avenue that you didn't anticipate.
Right. I appreciate that. Now, can you explain? Obviously, these are recommended 7-0 by the school board. Obviously, it's their special articles, but the
That's what
first
they do.
fund. Pardon me.
That's what they do. They vote
7-0.
7-0.
So, but the first one is 7-6 in favor from the budget committee, and the second one is 6-7. So, how do you even?
I don't know who flipped.
Okay.
I don't
There,
either.
there are people who, I won't say they vote flippantly or casually, let's say, and then forget how they
Inconsistently.
inconsistently. Perfect. On an issue, and I can understand it. I've probably done it myself at some point. On an issue that you don't care much about, you're kind of on the fence, and months later you're asked to vote on it again. You might flip the other way.
Right.
Of course, that was just minutes later, but.
Yeah, indeed.
And then you kind of alluded to the Article 14, which is the sexiest one of the bunch. And I mean, and this is the one about changing the names back. It was
sure.
Rhoda Quinn, I think, was the lead petitioner on this.
Yes.
Mike D said he's going to vote for it to change it back
Yes,
personally.
yes.
So
Okay. I give my credit for recognizing the importance and the value there. I voted to support this, and I think it's the right thing to do. I am
you mean
a little
support to go
support-
back.
To go back.
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
okay.
I am concerned. Amy brought up some, Superintendent Frechette brought up some valid concerns about some potential costs, but I find that to be a little bit disingenuous given the broad scheme of things with regards to worrying about costs.
Right.
Yeah. To me, the naming issue, and I attended the meetings where the school board discussed it, and they let a lot of people speak, and then they voted the way they wanted. It struck me that the arrogance, the proprietarial arrogance of those who are either working in the schools or sending kids to the schools, is reminiscent of the arrogance we see in Washington now, and for that matter, for the last 4 years. It's just a dismissal of all differing opinions, and I very much resent one of the people who spoke at the school meeting said basically, what right have you to change the name of our school? You don't send kids there, you don't work there. Well, she does work there, and now her husband's running for the, what is it, school board or
Yes.
budget committee, school board. I very much resent that. I mean, if you're building a new school, when they built a new high school, I thought they should have named it something else. But oh no, it had to be Kennett. We had kids who graduated in 2007 from the old school and 2009 from the new school. Didn't have much feeling for the new school. But when you take an old school that people have gone to and they refer to probably weekly in discussions with family, and change its name for what reason? It just seemed like coddling the anxiety of children that probably doesn't even really exist.
I mean, what strikes me, and I'm going to fashion an editorial for Saturday's paper about this. This is Thursday. We're voting next Tuesday. Is this, and I think bureaucracies get insulated, as we all know. Good or bad, they get insulated. But the fact that there were, hundreds of people that wanted this name change to go back, and those hundreds of people represent probably the core constituents who are going to vote. So just even politically, to upset those people, how can they not think this is going to come back to bite them when they, oh yes, we want the name change. Oh no, we don't want the budget. It just seems politically not a savvy move, regardless of the issues. But that's
Brian Wigan had over 600 names on the first round of petition when this first came up. That's significant.
To be fair, many of them no longer live here. There were people from away, but there were hundreds from town still who signed the petition. And the only reason there weren't more is there wasn't enough time and there weren't enough people aware of it.
Peter, any thoughts about the name change? I mean, I assume you're going to vote to go back?
I am going to vote to go back because I think it's important. And I felt when it happened, it felt like it was almost reprisal at the time. I don't completely believe that, but I just felt like it was, you close the school, we're going to do this. And I didn't like the feeling of that. I watched the videos, didn't go to the meetings maybe as often as Bill did, but I watched the videos during which this was all being deliberated. And I was unconvinced that the board, who voted predominantly in favor of changing the names, that they were doing it for reasons that were very pure.
I think the administrators, I'm going to push back a little bit. I mean, I do think the administrators or principals who feel strongly, and they're always first about their kids. I mean, I think I don't know if they're legitimate, but I think they have genuine feelings that they wanted to do this for the children. So I'll push back on that. I just think it's I think it's the role of the school board to take in consideration the administrators and the taxpayers.
Agreed.
And that's the thing. That's the level
that's where
I think
the breakdown.
That
occurred.
is not the school board's feeling.
Right.
This year, the budget committee asked the school board what they were going to do to, as a result of the significant tax impact. And the response, which I think came from the superintendent and was rubber stamped by the school board, is that we're not going to do anything. We're going to present the same budget we always have as a needs-based budget. I'm not sure what the needs are. Perhaps it's we need this much money to keep this many people employed. That seems to be the need.
Simply
but
speaking.
That person who is in the upper 10% of earners is deciding what's affordable for the rest of us, and they put it in writing that they weren't going to consider the tax impact.
We only have a few minutes left, and I guess I would like to get a final statement from you guys, or what your advice you have for the voters. But I mean, it's true is that we deserve what we get. I mean, you can criticize the school board and criticize the spending and all that, but I mean, the fact is that voters have the power to make a difference. Taxpayers and residents can run for the school board, and they don't. I mean, how do you explain politically why? If the criticism, obviously you guys are saying, is that it's just we've had this bloated school system, why haven't people reacted to it more strongly than they have?
Because they're not organized. There is no taxpayers association in this town. I made a feeble attempt last year to get new people, people who probably had never been before. I went around to trailer parks, frankly, looking for people who are probably paying $1,500 to $2,000 in taxes a year, and reminded them when the school meeting was. I remember seeing at least 200 people. Not one of them came to the meeting. I think not until enough people who want to stay here are hit hard enough that they have to worry about whether they're going to be able to. Not until then will enough people come out, unless there is a taxpayers association.
Bring back Joe Sullivan.
Well, he did it.
He did it, yes he did.
He and Irene Bay did it. Meanwhile, the PTO and the school board are doing it to us.
Right. Peter?
I think, first of all, the first shockwave, if you will, to the taxpayers came with the reval.
Right.
And I'm not going to pin any of the results of the reval on the budget, the school budget in particular. Clearly, it had an impact on that. But it's my belief that we're going to see some effect from what I'm seeing as the second shockwave effect of all of this, and that is taxpayers have gotten their December bills. The December bill would have been bigger than the June bill with the reval. That's more in recent memory. I think that may motivate more people to come out to vote. I surely hope so, and I appreciate the Sun doing all of this information to try to get the word out. It's very difficult to work in a budgetary kind of environment and translate what we do to the everyday person. I think you touched on that at the beginning of the meeting. We needed to keep this voter friendly and not, budget talk as it goes. So that translation is a problem. I agree with Bill and the Taxpayer Association. I think that would be something to consider down the road. But I'll also say, just in general, because I do look at a lot of things from a distance and try to make some assumptions based on that. But in general, in an environment where resources are plentiful and budgets are great and budgets go and get passed over and over again without an awful lot of pushback, there's little incentive for efficiency, whether it's in the private sector or the public sector. Conversely, in an environment where budgets are scarce, there's greater efficiency, more creativity, and I am not seeing that with this particular school district, and I haven't seen it in my 14, 15 years on the budget committee at this point. I've hardly seen any example of any creativity and ways to do the job more efficiently, that are more taxpayer friendly, that get the job done.
It's too, I said this with interviewing Mike and Amy and Ryan, is that it's too bad because of the way our system that we're really talking about, it's always about the money. The currency of our discussion is literally currency.
So to speak.
Yeah, so to speak. And,
good point.
And I think the people in the school administration and the teachers, I'm going to give them credit. I think personally that everybody, I'm not, not everybody, but I think they generally try to do a good job. And it's just unfortunate that you have this idea that we all want is a better school system and a good school system versus this other side of the brain that says, what can we afford? Mm-hmm. And it's really kind of the age-old discussion that we have. And we'll see what happens. We have 2 minutes, Bill. You want to give one final thought?
I would agree with you. That'll be my final thought. That
well, good. Let's leave it there if you're going to agree with it.
That I think most teachers are mean well, do their best, and in many ways are effective. I know many of them. People who criticize me for not knowing what teachers do probably don't know that I'm married to a woman who has been a teacher for over 30 years, and she still does a great deal that she's not paid for, and she still gets about half what a Conway teacher makes.
Well, that was a positive statement. Can we end it with a positive, Peter?
No, I agree with both of your comments. I think the teachers in our system, have met a lot of them. Both of my kids went through the entire school system. I'm not native, but they are. There was a lot of good that came out of their educational experience here in this district. I hear a lot of negative things, and I find myself defending the school district to people who have negative things to say. I think it boils down to leadership. And I think that there is, I'm not going to issue this as a challenge so much as it is a hope that the current administration will get out in front and lead in perhaps a more sustainable way, to use Bill's description of what my take was on the budget that we're facing, potentially being unsustainable. I'm hoping that as time goes on, we're going to get into a better place with test scores. We're going to get into a better place with regards to expenditures. We're going to make some difficult decisions and maybe have to pare some things back, whether it's something that the voters mandate or whether it's something that comes from within. But I'm hopeful that something will change.
Okay, I think we're out of time, and I always believe in the wisdom of the voter, so we'll find out on Tuesday.
That makes one of us.
Bill, Peter.
Thank you,
nice
Mark. Yeah, likewise.
All right, take care, guys.
Thank you.